What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Slow Restoration, and we have, I think, all the parts we need to put this G35 back together. First thing we have, well, let's deal with this first. We have our exhaust kit. So we got two of these kits again. It's the same kit that I used on the LS Extreme. It's just a little smaller piping. This is 2 1/4 inch, which will be dual 2 1/4 on this will be more than enough. Definitely better than the 1 7/8 it had stock. So we have our exhaust kit. We'll actually do a separate video of building this exhaust. The most important thing is the reason why it's in here. We're going to do the hydraulic part of the clutch system. The slave cylinder failed on this, which is very common on the 350Zs. Actually, right here, all of these fail. 07 to 08 350Z, 07 to 08 G35S, and then 09 and up and 08 up 370Z and the G37. These all had issues with the internal slave cylinder. So we got the Z-Speed Performance heavy duty one. This is supposed to be the one to have to fix it. We have a new Nissan master cylinder for it. Clutch master cylinder. So let's unbox this, get this opened. A little warning on the front: do not clean it, don't wash the grease off. Pretty self-explanatory, but I guess they have to put it on there. So first thing we notice, it is slightly different than stock. It's got an adapter plate, so it's kind of retrofitted off of probably something else. 2 lines here and the fittings. But so far it looks good. We'll get the old one bolted off, make sure this bolt's on, and let you know if we have any issues swapping that out. The other thing we are going to do to this transmission while it's out, we actually already drained it before we took it out, but we're going to refill it with new fluid, gear lube, whatever you want to call it, before we put it back in. They do include, of course, directions for installing this thing, and again, right up top it says do not compress. So they highly stress that, and we're not going to compress it. In removing this old clutch hydraulic system here, let's get some light in there. We're going to take a screwdriver and pick up on this wire tab to release this, the old line out of the, there you go, pop right out. Pull up on that and just pull over. The steel line will come right out. We already had the bolt loose on the side, so now we can get rid of that whole old setup. There's a 10mm bolt there and one more at the bottom. We'll take those out and this whole slave cylinder will pop off. This old, let's get over this drain pan. This old slave cylinder is actually so bad, as you can see, it's blown out. It's just leaking out with absolutely no pressure at all on it. So it is totally shot. With that out of the way, we can fish our lines through the opening of the bell housing with the new one. As you can see, when they assemble this thing, there's no room to slide the one bolt in. So they actually put that in there as they assemble the slave cylinder to the bracket, the mounting bracket. So you do have to run that screw in as you go before you can actually put that screw in. No big deal, but definitely worth mentioning. Goes on super easy here. Like I said, just fish these braided lines through the bell housing hole. And then we're actually gonna use some red Loctite on these mounting bolts just so they don't back out. But we'll get that in there, get that one started, run it in by hand and leave it loose, and then run that bottom one in. With that tightened up, you're actually done on the inside. Again, don't compress this, but make sure it spins freely. So we're all good with that. We're gonna come on the outside here, and we need to put our boot back on. They don't give you a whole lot to work with this shorter bleeder one, but there's plenty on this one. So we'll feed this through and kind of, this has a lip on it we'll just work that back in there and reinstall that boot. Next up, we're going to connect our bleeder T here. It actually just bolts on through the end here, through this banjo fitting. Like I said, they don't give you a whole lot there, but there's enough to get the job done. You have this bolt with a copper washer on either side of the banjo bolt. So we're going to feed that through. Put our copper washer on the other side. You probably can't see anything I'm doing here. And then we'll thread this onto that and then bolt this to that with the bleeder facing, of course, backwards. Let me get that done. We got that T spun on there. Like I said, through the banjo bolt, a copper washer on either side. They supply a new bolt here. We'll feed that through there and right into the factory spot on the bell housing. We'll go ahead and snug that up and then snug this whole assembly up, and then we just have our factory line to connect back when we get the trans back in. And there we have it. We did bolt that bracket back on using the factory bolt. Other than that, once we get our fluid line, once we get the trans back in there, get our fluid line coming down from the master back in here, then we just bend this around, connect that to it, and then we're ready to bleed. Bleeder is loose, so we'll snug that just until we get ready. They do include a bleeder cap, so we'll keep that. We'll put that on there and have it ready for when we're done with this. The only other thing we need to do to this trans, like I said, is put fluid back in it, and then we'll be ready to throw this back up in the car. With a little bit of help, we got that transmission slid back up in there. It is a little bit of a challenge. Of course, it's like any other transmission. You have to get the splines lined up as straight of a shot as you can onto the back of the motor, the splines lined up, and then once the splines are lined up, you have to pull into both the dowels on the block and the pilot bearing. So definitely take your time, and you're definitely going to need another hand or have a transmission jack handy. So we'll get this all, and then once you do get it lined up, put your bolts in and snug them up evenly to make sure you're not pulling one way or the other. So it needs to go in straight. So we'll get all these bell housing bolts tightened back up, starter bolts tightened back up, and then we can put the whole thing up and get this cross member tightened back up.
We're hyper miling right now.
Yeah, that's gotta be my favorite feature.
Dude, that is pretty awesome. That was in second all the way up to...
Yeah.
You just...
Well, that was... I banged third right before we quit.